Pynchon Point, the confluence of the Connecticut and Agawam rivers. Now, if you look at a map, it's not the Agawam River, it's the Westfield River. But once upon a time it was called the Agawam River, and we're going to check it out because it's instrumental in the founding of one of the great cities of the Northeast, Springfield, Massachusetts. I'm with Alex Temple here, and Springfield might not have the resonance of Boston or New York, but I'll tell you what, it hangs with Hartford quite nicely, and that's the capital of Connecticut, right? So it's
New Haven, another regional.
Right. It really is one of the beating hearts of New England, and it was founded quite differently than the other New England communities. I mean, we talk, Alex, about early New England in that general fashion as being like religiously centered.
Yes, we think of the Puritan ideology about religion and how sort of strict an adherence to the Geneva Bible and Calvinism they had. William Pynchon sees an opportunity in the fur trade of controlling the confluence of a couple of rivers here in the heart of the Connecticut Valley, and thinks he can make his religious community also a profitable company business town.
He's got to bring a minister out here. He gets the Minister Moxon to come out here with him. And, he's got to stamp the colony that he's establishing with the Puritan trappings of the time.
Absolutely.
But he's thinking a lot more clearly about what he's going to need to do to make money here. And I'm going to show you what Pynchon is going to look at when he comes up to this site where on the left you can see the Agawam River, or what we now call the Westfield River, and coming down from the north, the great Connecticut River. And directly across from us, a stone set of arches, that's where the Mill River comes in. That's the Mill River, and it was important to Pynchon because at the time they had the technology that would allow them to dam that up relatively easily and put in a mill system, lumber and grist, most essentially, which would be the beating heart of the colony that he hoped to establish here. People need to eat, and people need to cut timber to build their stockade or their homes, whatever they're going to have to build. Meanwhile, the Connecticut is the great source of transportation. This is how Pynchon's going to get here from the coast, which is quite a journey, around 60 miles from here to Long Island Sound. And Pynchon's coming up in a larger pinnace and then gets in a smaller pinnace and comes the rest of the way with a couple of, what did he have, 2 guys with him initially. When at this spot, or nearabouts, the Beaver has decided to operate on what we would identify as a, looks like a cottonwood tree. Mr. Beaver has gotten those teeth and gone wild.
I've never seen that much of a dent in a tree for a beaver that hasn't fallen over.
He's gone a little wild here. And there's quite a few beaver lodges up the river here on the Agawam or Westfield River. So Pynchon comes up here with the notion of making contact with the native people and establishing a trading post that will allow him to have access to the beaver trade. Now that Westfield River, Agawam River, goes way up, 35, 45 miles into the Berkshires, divides, catches the southern Berkshires with its south branch, and its north branch continues up to what we now call Huntington, where it divides into 3. And there were native people there who had access to fur-bearing animals that we should have brought one of our hats.
I was about to say, these are for hats, not meat
They're,
or anything else.
Yeah, they're looking for those crazy broad-brimmed, waterproofed beaver skin hats or mink hats. And that was a rage in Europe. It basically worked as a raincoat.
Mm-hmm.
So they're looking for that sort of thing. This is the site where Pynchon meets the Agawam. And we'll keep walking out onto this point over here so you can see the city of Springfield today. And you'll notice that we're on the west bank of the Connecticut River. And if you look, you'll see that the city of Springfield. We can't see the biggest buildings, but we can see a lot of it. The Basketball Hall of Fame there.
Chestnut Tower.
The Chestnut Tower, yeah. That's on the east side. And the reason for that is the native people here, the Agawam, said, yeah, sure. We'll agree to sign your, they didn't know what they were signing, honestly. But they signed a treaty, and 18 chieftains, they're called, sachems by their families,
heads of paterfamilias,
whatever we want to call them. They signed this treaty. Kamuke and Machawan are two of the names that stick out. Conius was the great sachem of the Agawam at the time, and even his wife and mother would be mentioned by Pynchon and given the opportunity to put their marks on, which is kind of neat, because Pynchon's colony is the only colony that actually allows female participation. This kind of gives us a little bit of a glimpse into Pynchon as a human being. He understood he was going to be in the howling wilderness out here, and if he doesn't make a good agreement with the native people, the colony's going to be a flop.
Yeah, this is the frontier of English colonial settlement for a while.
We're in the wild west of English colonies right now, the Connecticut River. So Pynchon establishes a trading post about maybe half a mile up the Agawam River. And ultimately, just a couple of years after the colony was established, the Agawam complained to him that his cattle and his pigs were getting into their crops. And if you know about the way the native people grow their crops, the three sisters are grown in clusters, with corn in the middle, squash and pumpkin around the outside, and beans growing up the corn. And they politely asked Pynchon if he would, in fact, go to the other side of the river so they wouldn't have problems with the livestock. And he complied, because remember, his entire colony is about getting help from the native people. Connecticut River. So the Westfield River's confluence with the Connecticut, very, very historic site for us if we're thinking about the history of Springfield, Massachusetts. Visible on the other side of the hill there, you see Bay State West and the Monarch Building, and of course up close and personal, Springfield's awesome sewage treatment plant called Bondi's Island. And what's really exciting to me, and probably you too, is to know that their pumping station, which is up that Mill River, has just been replaced with a brand spanking new one, which is good, because just last summer, the Ironman Challenge involved thousands of Ironmen from all over the world swimming across the Connecticut River to West Springfield. And of course,
down it for like a mile.
Yep.
Or whatever it is. Huh.
Yep. And of course, there had been a sewerage leak that Springfield tried to say. First they said, we had a sewerage leak. Then they realized the Ironman Challenge was going on. They retracted it, and then they admitted later that it had actually happened. So there are people all over the world that, if they get local news, realize they were swimming with more than just their fellow swimmers, which is always fun. But it's a really neat vantage to take a look at the area. It all started by William Pynchon, who was all about creating a square deal with the native people and keeping them happy, which he did. And then
he got kicked out for writing a treatise on religion that did not square well with the authorities in Boston. They sent him back to England.
I feel like he was literally trying to be or become truly independent of either Connecticut, because at first he had agreed to be part of the Connecticut settlement. Now, Connecticut is only about 5 miles down the Connecticut River, so he was part of 3 communities. He had originally agreed to be part of the Connecticut colony, recently founded by Thomas Hooker, comprising of communities of Wethersfield, Windsor, and Hartford, which had been the Dutch city of, a fort called New Hope?
Yep.
And then he had decided enough is enough, and he got in a little bit of an argument involving the Pequot War. and involving the fact that the Connecticut settlers wanted corn from the native people that lived here, and they wanted to pay rock-bottom prices. And Pynchon said, corn is worth this is what you'll pay. And John Mason, the hero of the Pequot War, wanted nothing to do with paying a higher price for corn. The savages want that much, they're trying to rob me. And ultimately, he accused Pynchon of being usurious, being all about making money, which Pynchon probably was, but Pynchon was also trying to keep the native people happy. He's the one that had to live amongst them. And in the end, Pynchon decided to join the Mass Bay Colony, albeit loosely. And I mean, we see him playing some interesting games with the governor of Massachusetts, Governor Winslow, where he's saying, you know, Winslow wants to hang 2 Quabog Indians who have killed 5 Menominths, maybe 25 miles northeast of here. He wants to hang them. And Pynchon says they're not subject to the laws of the good King of England. They are sovereign people. So he's taken the side of the Indians multiple times. And then he finally writes, what was the name of the book?
I don't know the name of the book, but it's one of the first banned books.
The Meritorious Price of
our
Redemption.
I will look it up. Yeah, it's something about
the Meritorious Price of Our Redemption, something like that. Temple's looking it up. But he writes this book, and you see that he has religious independence. He's literally thinking about going, as I said the other day in the lecture I gave, in the direction of New Haven, where he's going to break
the Meritorious Price of Our Redemption, the founding of Springfield, Massachusetts.
Their game, our game might be football or baseball, and their game is Scripture. And if you derivate from the Scripture just a tiny bit, you're in trouble. And Pynchon was hoping to get away with it, I think, because if he had gotten away with it, he creates his own unique congregation out here, separating himself from Boston and the Mass Bay Colony, and separating himself from Connecticut and Hartford. And they recalled him. They pretty much made him answer the ministers in Boston had become pretty powerful by that point. And they brought him back and interrogated him, didn't like his answers, sent him home. And they left. Let's start walking.
They left his son John in charge here.
John Pynchon, a good man for the job if you're the governor of Massachusetts, but from our point of view, a bit of a toady. So he was all about keeping the governor of Massachusetts happy at the cost of his own colony, at the cost of his own liberty, and at the cost of his relationship with the native people. And what'll happen because of John Pynchon is the native people here and the Pynchon colony will begin to drift apart. There had always been like unfounded rumors that the native people were about to attack. That had been plaguing the Springfield colony for quite some time. But what we actually see with John Pynchon is the realization of those fears with the advent of King Philip's War in 1675 and the burning of his father's life's work, the city of Springfield, with only 3 houses surviving. But that's another story.